That sounds great. And oh my gosh, I mean, I said it yesterday, I'm going to say it again today. What an amazing day of panelists and speakers, and just an opportunity to learn and hear from each other. And, I think Nick brought this up yesterday, and it bears repeating again for today. We're in a community as compliance folks that is so willing to share. It doesn't matter what industry you're from. It doesn't matter if you're a competitor or in a totally different industry or segment of the market. Compliance folks always wanted to share and give that additional guidance and support to each other. And that's what I've always loved about being a compliance officer, being in this industry, working in this industry. It makes it so great. And then to add the ambassadors to this, what an awesome thing to do for your company, but for our community, our larger compliance community, to have folks that are joining us on this journey. It's not, something that I think we've all felt and sometimes have this issue with as compliance practitioners. Sometimes you feel like you're on an island. Boy, today have I learned, and I think everyone else that's been listening over these last couple of days has really learned, that you don't have to be on that island, and you're probably not on that island. Maybe you don't know it yet if you don't have an ambassador program going, or you haven't started one yet. Certainly something to think about, and it really does break down those walls. And what a great way to get more feedback, because that's really how you do your program effectively, how you do your work effectively, is to get that feedback, find out where those risks are. So opening up, the more lines of communication you can have, that is awesome. There's never anything wrong with that. So I do want to just take a second and hopefully pull up to the top. I think we expected a few of our panelists to come back and a few of our ambassadors to come back today. So if any of you are out there and are willing to help participate during this wrap-up session, I'd love for you to come off of your closed video, turn your video screens back on, all of your smiling faces, and come off of mute, or anyone else, any of our attendees today. I know all of you have lots of great things to say. I've been seeing it in the chat all day. So definitely join us in these next few minutes, because we definitely want to hear more and more voices. There's Tony Lynn, great. I see Karsten is on. Obviously, Alyssa is on too. And I see some others in there as well. Oh, great. Hi, Beatrice. Nice to see you. All right, great. Well, I'm just going to start off with some thoughts from me, but I want to open it up, and I really am looking to you, ambassadors, to help me with this first question and thought that I had. But compliance folks, don't go away, because I'm going to come to you pretty quick. But so much, I'm so inspired by all of the ambassadors who joined us today, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking your time, additional time, to share. Everything you've said has just been music to my ears as a compliance person. Things like culture is all of our responsibility, tone from the top, but execution is with the folks doing the work. It takes courage. That we just heard that, walk the talk, all those things. I think Alyssa used the word superpower earlier today when she was talking in some of the chat, and I agree with her. And Karsten, you pointed out too, I love the humility that we're seeing from our ambassadors, but I'm going to take a second and I'm going to brag on them for a minute, because they are doing that hero work. They have superpowers. So ambassadors, come off of mute, talk with us for a few minutes. What is your superpower? If you don't want to say that, then what superpowers have you developed as being an ambassador, or what are you still working on? I think the rest of our group would love to hear from you. So take this moment, brag on yourself a little bit, and I will turn it over to Anthony and Tony and others who are the compliance folks that are helping these ambassadors do their work. Brag on your ambassadors for a few minutes. Anyone want to start?
This is Elizabeth. I was just on, and yeah, you know what? I'm gonna brag a little bit. I think one of my superpowers that has evolved is the trust factor. And that's just letting the employee, the peer, know that hey, we're like family, you know, let's talk, right? And I think that is such a huge plus if you can get to that point where you can engage them and you know that they're trusting you, that whatever is said with you is safe, it's a safe space, and that you have the resources for them to go to. And hopefully, you know, they come away with that conversation saying, hey, you know what, I can tell somebody else, and, you know, in another situation, why don't you go talk to Elizabeth? You know, that is huge. I think that's been a big one for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Anthony.
I would just say, and I'm kind of bragging on Samuel Fung, one of our presenters today, who's really a great representative of the best of our ethics ambassadors. I would say that the superpower is a combination of charisma and authenticity. You saw his enthusiasm. I can tell you employees love him. So they are just naturally drawn to listening to a leader like that. And it makes it so much easier to deliver ethics as a positive message that employees want to get on board with. So that's what I would say his and a really good ethics ambassador's superpower is.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. And what initiative to actually join us via video because he couldn't be here today. I loved that. And I loved that video. And I just please give him our thanks for doing that extra work and going the extra mile for us. Tony Lynn, I saw you come off mute for a minute there. Have you got something you wanted to add about and brag on Elizabeth and Yvonne a little bit?
Yes. Yes, and he mentioned this earlier, but the passion is key. You want to make sure that folks who are in this role are truly passionate about advancing the culture of your company, because employees will sense when when someone is not genuine. So you just want to make sure that also at the same time, of course, that you build that rapport with them. You build that trust as Elizabeth spoke on, and make sure that they have the tools and the resources that they need to make a difference in the organization.
Fantastic. Great advice. Great advice. Anyone else? So yes, and seeing some fully agree. My driver is my passion for my company coming in on the chat. So put those in the chat if you don't want to take your mic off. I totally understand that. Keep it coming in the chat. I do want to switch gears just a little bit and pull back on some of the topics that we talked about earlier today, especially just to get some additional thoughts from our speakers and our ambassadors and compliance folks. Certainly, for anyone who may have missed out on some of the session earlier, one of the things I noticed as I listened throughout the sessions today was language came up quite a bit, language barriers, cultural differences, those kinds of things. Great point and a great thing to really think about. So I kind of throw out there, again, put it in the chat if you'd like, or just come off of mute or raise your hand. Happy to call on you if you're willing to speak out loud to the group. For our ambassadors, I would ask, what tips do you have to help others feel more comfortable in those situations? Ambassador, what tips did you take in those situations if you've dealt with that for yourself to help yourself feel better or more comfortable in those? Or what tips would you offer to others in those same kinds of situations where language might be an initial barrier, but you really do want to open up that conversation and you want to encourage that open communication across? And for the compliance folks, do you have any resources that you're giving out to your ambassadors to help them with those kinds of issues? Mike, I see your hand is up.
Hey, hi, Jennifer. So I did want to mention just something I was going to mention earlier in the last presentation about that idea that ethics ambassadors can sometimes be a cop, or that they're there as kind of plants. So I wanted to be very, the point I wanted to make was in terms of language, how you're describing your ethics ambassadors to the general population is so important. And I will say we learned that lesson ourselves here, because in our charter and in some of the other kind of language that we used to describe the ethics council here, we used to describe them as the eyes and ears of ethics. And that just you know, and I mean, for me, that's already borderline kind of like, is that person here as a plant? Is there a spy? A cop? It evokes that cops being among us language. And I can only imagine how that could be badly translated if it were to another culture or to another language. So I think it's really incumbent on us to make sure that we are describing our ethics ambassadors truly as, you know, as an extension of the ethics office, as resources for the ethics office, as that opportunity for employees to surface concerns and ask questions, and make sure that translates really well to whatever language or culture that you're speaking to. Thanks for the time.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. And Beatrice had a great comment too. She said, you know, besides ethics and compliance, another very high value in our company is diversity and inclusion. We also do not tolerate any aggressive behavior. There's zero tolerance for that. Great point, Beatrice. Thank you for adding that to the conversation. Karsten, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, if I may, I want to pile on a little bit with the praise for the ethics ambassadors. So there are two themes that I've picked up on during the conversation today, and I think they are of tremendous value also for ethics practitioners at the corporate level. You know, who do this for a living. The first one is support. You know, I've heard about support, about caring, about walking in someone else's shoes, about empathy, putting the tools and resources out that employees need. You know, this whole support orientation and this caring orientation, I think that is exactly the right approach and the right posture for ambassadors, but not only for ambassadors, but I think for ethics and compliance programs overall, right? Compliance programs also often struggle with that perception, right or wrong, that, you know, we are the cops, or, you know, we are prescribing rules, we are monitoring, we're disciplining. We're not always seen as the buddies and the partners and the caring supporters. And it's not surprising that this is coming from ambassadors, as mentioned, so loud and clear, because they are right there, right? They have the contact with employees. So when you talk to face, right, you notice that this a stern language is a language of, you know, instructing about rules, monitoring. It doesn't really resonate. It doesn't build that human connection that we need and that positive engagement. So that's something I think really I find very inspirational. I think that we can benefit from as ethics and compliance practitioners. And it also ties into this aspect of humility that came up. The second point is, you know, the wealth of information and insight that ambassadors have by virtue of having these very concrete, real life interactions with people, right? Ambassadors know what the risks are in their operating businesses. They know what people are struggling with. They know their questions. They know where they need help and support. That information is so critical. I think, Jennifer, you mentioned that earlier, right? If we want to do the ethics and compliance program right, if we want it to be of value of business value, we need to make sure our codes, our trainings, etc., reflect the real business risks, right? The operational risks. So that would be my call to action, is to say, you know, make your voices heard. We, the ethics and practitioners, I think often our focus is on transferring the program into the businesses. You play such a tremendously important role there, but we also need your input. Tell us, what risks do you perceive? You know, is that reflected in the code of conduct? Help with the risk assessment. You know, tell us what are the training issues that are really relevant to you. Help the company set a good training curriculum. Also say, you know, what's working in the ambassador program, what not. Help the company design and continuously improve, right? Yesterday, we've heard from some of the program managers that there is some of that outreach, but I think there's a huge opportunity to do even more of that. Yeah, and if the company launches on a new initiative, such as a new code, a new training program, I think there should always be an engagement. If you have an ambassador community, reach out to them, collect their feedback, their input, their ideas. It will make the program more effective and resonate better in the businesses. So those are the two. Make use of the massive knowledge that's there, make your voices heard, and just keep that user-centered, employee-centered, caring, supportive posture. That's exactly what we need.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, Nick, I see you're back here.
Hey.
You want to add some of your thoughts from today's sessions?
I mean, the thing that just keeps coming back to me is a lot of what Hema talked about this morning, and it was about risk management at scale, and it's about crowdsourcing risk management, and we really can't do that unless people feel connected and involved. And it's been a refrain across both days that I think is a really critical one. And Carson just kind of touched on a lot of those things as well. But bringing people into the process and making them feel a part of it is what allows you to stop, suffering from goalie syndrome. Goalie syndrome is when you get all the blame for any goals that get into the net and none of the credit for any of the blocked shots. Well, it's everyone's job to stop those goals, right? And so the best goalies are the ones that have a best group of defenders, and their strikers are also playing defense, and even the folks on attack are playing defense. So taking some of that ethos and actualizing it and operationalizing it is probably a lot closer. It's not as far away as it seems, especially when we think about the proportion of people that really want to have an ethical workplace and just getting involved and feeling like they're doing something and feeling like they're making a difference. I don't know, these last 2 days have been really kind of inspiring for me, because this dream that we have of making the world a better workplace and making our workplaces better and more ethical, for a long time I think it seemed like it was very, very far off, and it's not, and that's exciting. We can see some real change in our lifetime.
Absolutely. So I think I want to shift gears a little bit too, and go back to what I thought was a really great meld from yesterday too. We had, I think during the BP session, had a conversation start up around metrics again. And we had a great session yesterday around metrics too. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, make sure once the videos are posted, you do see that, because it was awesome. So I'd love to hear from our ambassadors, maybe from Tony Lynn and Anthony too, as program managers. What, from the ambassador's perspective, what do you feel are the important things for the business units and for the compliance folks to be watching, to be measuring and tracking and trending? And Anthony and Tony Lynn, if you've got anything from your perspective on metrics that you're tracking, I'd love to hear that, and I'm sure the rest of the group would as well.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I mean, from a measurement perspective. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Tony Lynn.
Yeah, I mean, my colleague Mauricio yesterday did go into our kind of our measurement and evaluation framework. So there are 3 parts that we look out for. So first, we as a program team, are we doing everything possible, whether it be providing our ambassadors the tools and resources that they need. We do track to see, how many employees are actually looking at some of the resources, like the bulletin that we put together. So there's already a back-end analytics in that with an MS way. So we take a look at that. We track that to see which one of our resources are actually being utilized, by, whether it be by our ambassadors ourselves or by employees, where our ambassadors actually cascaded that, onto their organization. Second, we also want to measure our ambassador confidence. Are they able to fulfill the role? And so we do send out surveys to them periodically just to gauge, whether they feel like they have the support that they need from their leaders. How effective are the tools and resources for them as they do their outreach? And then the last piece of it is really the cultural impact. So we are still exploring ways to see, are our values ambassadors truly making an impact as it relates to our general culture. So we're looking to work with HR on this in terms of maybe inputting questions into our company-wide pulse survey and maybe tie it back to our values. So that's kind of still in the exploration phase right now. But those are some of the things that we're looking at.
Adding some stuff to exit interviews as well is going to give you some great insights. And I think to that point, the more areas you can find pools of data that can corroborate this general feeling, which by its nature is hard to kind of put your finger on, is our culture getting better? The better, right? So the more sort of data points you can get to kind of corroborate and be sort of leading indicators, the better you can be. I was talking to Michael Duran at 3M, and he's done a lot of really cool things with data to help get a sense of how much participation they're getting, not only in training, but from a speak up basis, tying in stuff from, like I said, exit interviews and things like that. So we have so much data at our fingertips, and sometimes it feels like it's like overwhelming. I don't really know where to start, but yeah, I love those insights, Tony Lynn.
Anthony, did you have something you want to add?
Sure. And it is something that's very difficult to quantify in dollars and cents, which is what the business usually wants to see. So, other ways that we've looked at it is if we have a way of measuring employee engagement. And in a couple of our markets where we began the program, we saw an increase in employee engagement, both with ethics and compliance and even with HR.
Amazing.
So that was a nice thing to be able to show the business. Once your program is established, you may not be able to see that so much, but when you're starting up new, that's a great way to do it. If you don't have that, you can measure just the numbers of outreaches by employees to ethics ambassadors. And if you happen to have some information, which you may not have, how many of those perhaps were resulted in a significant investigation or a significant result, that's something that's a little measurable that can be shared back. And then just, even if you don't have that, if you can look at the actions that ethics ambassadors have taken, how many communications have they made or trainings have they done? That's at least a way of measuring. So there's just a few of the things that we look at and report back to the business.
It seems like an opportunity there for ECI to do a little study on employee engagement as it correlates with the launch of a program like this. I don't doubt it at all. And I think it's such an easy, great way to start making the case for a couple of extra dollars for the organization to invest, whether it's sort of implicitly in terms of like, yes, I'll allow you to spend some of company time on this, or explicitly in terms of like launching marketing materials to get people to engage in this thing, because every single point of added employee engagement, that falls directly to the bottom line. And if we as ethics and compliance professionals are not starting to take credit for things beyond the risk mitigation piece of the puzzle, the avoidance of pain, then we're always going to be stuck in this sort of cost center thing that so many of us feel trapped in.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Beatrice also mentioned in the chat here too, that she measures ethics in our annual employee survey, which is a significant part of the survey, and also turnover and exit reasons. Thank you for that. That is awesome. And I've been chatting. I think we've got Sunny back from earlier today. She was one of our ambassadors that spoke and did such a great job this morning sharing her thoughts with us. And I think she wanted to add a little bit more on the training that the advisors get along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Sunny?
Yes, the emotional intelligence, every once in a while in our quarterly meetings, we not only get information about the business, but there's also training for us. So we've had unconscious bias, we've had nonverbal communication, we've had emotional intelligence, and all of these just help us read people and reach out to them.
That is so great. Thank you for adding that. Anyone else want to put anything in the chat or add to that comment or add to any of the comments that we've had so far? This has been great. Thanks, Beatrice. Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So
let me throw out another. Oh, go ahead.
Real quickly, sorry, I'm always writing because something comes to my mind. It's just, I think in the end, to have an ethical culture, it's really the leadership that has to live it, has to be a great role model, and always emphasize it again in town halls or when they speak, or as you mentioned, Tone, at the top message. So in our company, this is really one of the top priorities. I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, so it is even it is always very, very, very important, but in our industry, it is extremely important that we are ethical and also compliant. Of course, we have a very small framework in which, and a lot of regulations where we can work and what we can do and are allowed to do. So if the leadership is not bold enough, you know, to communicate that way, and also, as I mentioned, to say, hey, we do not accept aggressive behavior, no matter in which role you are, no matter in on which grade you are. Zero tolerance. You can leave immediately. And this is not. It sounds a little bit harsh, I must say, when I say it like that, but it's just really not tolerated. And I must say, in our company, it is really, I'm now more than 20 years with our company, and it got better and better and better. And I'm just very, very proud of my company and our leadership, how they live it. And it starts with the chairman. You know, it starts with the board and the chairman and the CEO who stand there in front of the employees and are also very approachable, by the way. They are not in an ivory tower. They are all approachable.
That is amazing.
I don't know if that
so
helps,
awesome.
but it just makes it then. So what I wanted to say in the end, my work as ethics ambassador, we have so few cases, very, very few cases. I personally only had one case, actually a case that challenged me because that person did not want that I report it. Although as an ethics ambassador, I have the duty to say, if you want to talk to me as an ethics ambassador, it can be that I have to report your case. But she mentioned, no, I don't want that you report it. And now it is more a little bit of a friend's engagement, or it became a little bit, I became a friend now because
That's so great. Beatrice, would you be willing to share what company you're with?
Yes, MSD. So in the US, we are known as Merck & Co.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Welcome. Thank you also.
I mean, this whole thing, I mean, I love this whole seminar or this academy because, I mean, it's giving us actual tactics, actual techniques to really start affecting the kind of change in our cultures that is right there for us to take. Many times I think we think, we have these ideas of how we want our cultures to change and the impact that ethics can play in the broader story of our organizations. And it seems like, how do I get this train moving? How do I start building some inertia here? And this allows you, I mean, that story was phenomenal. These cultures are changeable, and they're changeable in the ways that we want them to be. And the quickest way to do it is getting a chorus of people singing the same song,
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I'd like to actually pull on the question that Karsten asked, maybe Sunny or Beatrice, or certainly anyone else that's joined us today. Talk about the training topics again. I think we wanted to hear a little bit more about that. What exactly, and maybe also add what are the things that you felt have been the most helpful to you in your role as ambassadors? And maybe what are some of the things that you're looking forward to learning more about as you continue?
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I can speak to that. I spoke earlier. I don't know, Nick, if you were on. I'm an ambassador with the utility company, Southern California Edison, one of the largest, I suppose, on the West Coast. And yes, I definitely will boast about some the training that was initially given to us. Well, there really kind of wasn't. It was very a gray area, just kind of some overview conversations. But as it evolved, they created smaller sessions with us. And when I say they, the Values Ambassador leads, the program coordinators said, hey, does anyone feel like we can, it would be a benefit for us to come to you and have a smaller session so we can talk And absolutely, you know, we took advantage of that. We brought in ambassadors from locations that were not too far from us that could meet at one location. Obviously, this is, you know, pre-pandemic, and we were able to sit in a room much more intimate and talk about the role and talk about any things that were coming up that we were having challenges with, just to kind of that helped tremendously. And obviously now, you know, post-pandemic, we went into a virtual arena where still able to do that with breakout sessions in our meetings where we can kind of break out, have smaller groups. And now you're getting a mix of people you've maybe never would interact with at any point, because you're in such a, you know, our company is huge. We have over 12,000 employees. So you have an opportunity to speak to people who are having different challenges and may be able to help you with some insight that maybe you hadn't thought about, and you can give them some you know, best practices. Even though the operating unit may be different, the district may be different, the work may be different, your peers, the type of or whether you're in a supervisor role, whatever it is. I mean, we were like one place now. We're in one level. It's a safe place. Let's talk about this. That's been very helpful in the virtual setting at this point. I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's
Welcome.
phenomenal, and it helps us to create an actual community, because you're going through things together and you're sharing what you're struggling with, and you know, you're sharpening each other.
Right.
Thanks so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as opposed to like just a one, you know,
Totally.
little bulletin that they send out. Okay, read this manual. Well, no, that's big difference when you can reach out personally.
You know, the strength of a network, you know, network theory says that the more nodes in a network, the stronger that network is. But
Absolutely.
for those nodes to provide value to the network, they have to have connection points. You know what I'm saying? And so many
like
times
electricity, right?
Exactly.
Got to power it up.
Good. I see. Now I'm catching up to you. I'm catching up to your pun there. Anthony, what would you add to this discussion? You're on mute.
There, sorry about that. There was a question about values and the difference between an ethics ambassador and a values ambassador. They may be set up differently in different companies, but they're really the same. We've at Starbucks have really focused on presenting ethics as one of our company values, because values is something at Starbucks and probably most organizations that employees really relate to. And yet a lot of companies talk about mission and values in a very amorphous way without identifying them. So we've really just been very forward about identifying ethics as one of our values and one of the things that employees can connect with. And also inclusion. I know somebody else mentioned that. And even though at Starbucks, there is a different function that supports inclusion and diversity, it's a corporate value. And it's one that we can partner with. And frankly, because ethics and compliance is responsible for anti-discrimination and anti-harassment, what is the opposite of discrimination and harassment but inclusion and diversity? So we really are a proponent of that as one of our values too. And again, we've seen an increase in engagement by focusing on values, kind of the what you should do rather than what you shouldn't do.
Love it. How about you, Tony Lynn? Anything to add there?
Yeah. I love what Anthony stated. Being ethical is definitely part of our values. One of our company values is actually integrity. So it's not to say, when currently in our current state as a values ambassador program, we don't, of course, we talk about company policies, we talk about compliance. We have our CECO come in and talk to our ambassadors about retaliation and what that might look like in the workplace. But I think something as simple as a switch in the language, it just resonated a lot better with our employees, because when we did have an ethics ambassador program before, and the term might be a little esoteric, and folks, they might think you're that whole stereotype about the corporate spy. We really wanted to be more inspirational sounding, and so we made that switch in term to brand ourselves as the values ambassador program, and talk about things about D&I, which is related to one of our company values of respect. And so, as I mentioned before, we have a roadmap for the entire year where we focus on one value at a time. And I think that's been a really great change in terms of really going about that approach, because I feel that our employees are more engaged that way and are more inclined to come to our values ambassadors and with their concerns or whatever's on their mind.
I love that, Tony Lynn. We have a great question from the chat from Julie, and she was asking Anthony what are Starbucks values. They're thinking about redoing their values in their organization, and while Anthony is coming off mute and bringing those together, I'd like to just sort of offer this. We've seen a lot of success with folks crowdsourcing those values from people in the organization versus them feeling, again, when people feel like they're a part of something, the odds of them digesting those and living those out and feeling like those are their values is always going to be a lot higher. So that tool that Hema used today is a great way to start to crowdsource those things. And I think what you'll probably find is that people are going to be using a lot of synonyms for the same kind of values, and they're going to start to kind of cluster across a handful of 5 to 7 different values that, that's a really organic way to reinvent the values in your organization. But Anthony, what would you add from the Starbucks perspective?
Well, I can provide a link to a whole website about Starbucks mission and values. I'll just kind of quote off a few here. Creating a culture of warmth and belonging. So of course that goes along with coffee shop atmosphere, but also inclusion, where everyone is welcome. Acting with courage, challenging the status quo. We often leverage that one with talking about ethics because it does require ethics, or it does require courage to speak up sometimes. Same with being present, connecting with transparency, dignity, and respect. Again, that goes back to inclusion, but also, being your true self, being able to be your true self, and being respectful of others who are as well. And then, delivering the best in all we do and holding ourselves accountable. Again, that can be said of the business, but that can also be said of each of us as professionals, being our most ethical and inclusive selves. So I'll put a link in the chat that's got the whole statement, but that's kind of a synopsis there.
That's great. Thank you. I love they're not just words, but they're kind of feelings. You're kind of describing the actual behavior that you want in those. I kind of nerd out in the values discussion because there's so many cool ways that folks have breathed a lot of life into the values that they want their company to espouse.
Absolutely. And I think if anybody else is willing to share what their company's values are, that would be awesome to share in the chat with each other. I see that Tony Lynn added SCE's values as safety, integrity, excellence, respect, continuous improvement, and teamwork. Amazing values. That is awesome. If anybody else wants to add in and be a part of that conversation too, that would be great. And maybe we can even help crowdsource some ideas for Julie here. So it looks like we got a question from Andrea. Apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. For those that have established programs, is there one main person who's responsible for spearheading the launch of the program, or how are duties delegated? Maybe Anthony or Tony Lynn, or maybe we've got Hema or Eve back from earlier today. I would love to hear from you all as to how you got your programs started.
Yeah, for us, well, first we have 2 executive sponsors. Our CICO is one of them, and then our SVP of Human Resources is the other. And then we do have our director, who is the program sponsor, and we meet with him on a weekly basis. But the actual team doing the work is, myself, along with 5 other colleagues. We're actually down two team members, so we're going to backfill those positions fairly soon. But the way that we set it up is, well, what is your skill set? What is your strength? So I'm responsible for the communication of the program. So I develop a lot of the tools and resources and materials that get cascaded to our values ambassadors. We actually have a values ambassador who is on our program team as well. That's a new thing that we kind of did a couple years ago, just to get that perspective from an actual VA to see would this work well? I mean, and are people going to be turned off by this or not? And so her perspective has been really, really great. And she's actually from Human Resources, and she has a background in OCM, organizational change management. So when you roll out something new, she'll definitely give us that change perspective that we need. And then Mauricio Gutierrez, who spoke yesterday, he also has a background in measurement and evaluation. So he's kind of been spearheading that part of it. And we have an analyst who does help support me in terms of general communication. So depending on what the person's skill set is, I think we round each other out pretty well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Anthony, did you have anything you wanted to say about kind of who's responsible? And
Sure. At Starbucks, we started our program kind of small and organically. So it was really the program manager who was largely responsible for it. I think with a managing director at the time. I actually wasn't part of starting the program, but I manage it now and am familiar with the history. So we really just did it, starting with a couple of either business units or markets, working with them directly and kind of just one-on-one, the program manager and the managing director with the leaders there. So, not with a big announcement or anything, but just sort of bit by bit organically.
That's tremendous. That's great. Anyone else want to jump in on that question before we move away from it? I think it's a really good one.
I think it was said yesterday, you just have to get started. You just have to do something. And, there's little steps you can take. And I think, the way things always happen is it's little by little and then all at once. And people in your organization are just itching to get involved in something like this. It's really a massive opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. There were a couple of questions that I noticed. Oh, whoops, we got something in the chat here at Panasonic principles. Oh, great. Thank you, Dan, for sharing Panasonic's principles. And everybody take a look at that in the chat if you haven't seen it already. A couple of questions came up during the day today that I don't think we've been able to get to yet. So I'm going to throw these out there, and maybe I'd ask some of our ambassadors, either if you participated earlier today or you're just listening and want to add to this. But there were some questions about what are some of the primary issues you receive as ambassadors? What are the things that folks are reaching out to you for? And what are those things that you would tell others that may be thinking about being an ambassador to be ready to answer and to be ready to work through? Maybe Elizabeth or Sunny, if you're willing to jump back in on that conversation, that would be great.
Wrong button. There we go. Okay, so my biggest issue would be gifts and entertainment. That's huge. So every Christmas we go through this. I send email out. I tell them what to do. I provide them with a letter to send. I tell them what to do with the gifts. So that's really our biggest issue, is just gifts and entertainment.
Cool. That's one that we haven't talked about yet over the last couple of days. So that's a great one to bring up. Always a big topic, and actually one that's probably going to be coming up pretty soon here, right? I know we all hate looking at the calendar and thinking, oh my gosh, the holidays, but they'll be here before we know it, that's for sure. Any other thoughts or anything else anybody wants to put in the chat on the top topics they're getting? Elizabeth, I saw you just come off.
Yeah, and yes, Sunny, of course, that does definitely always come up at some point or another, and we have very strict guidelines on that information, and exactly, we just kind of email them and remind them of the resource to go to, which makes it easy. I think the tough ones would be the more confidential conversations that a employee might approach you with, maybe an issue they're having with a peer, a coworker. And depending on the depth of that, depending on, if it's just work itself and, something that's on the surface, having that conversation with them, that you can deal with from a value standpoint, is there still respect happening here, or has there been disrespect? Are we working as a team? Those are a little bit easier than, hey, I'm seeing an ethics issue here. I know that something's going on that shouldn't be going on. I have had those conversations on both ends of the spectrum. And when you have conversations that are more sensitive, you really need to know what you're going to do with that, because the person's coming to you from a very emotional place. And I've had people break down and cry with me, and I almost feel like I'm like a chaplain, right? They're coming to me and say, oh, I'm having this issue, I can't go on. And it could get really deep with some of these conversations, and you really have to be careful. I learned that along the way, that you have to be careful with your words. You have to be careful with how you're going to direct them, and make sure that your resources are there to guide them in that direction, because that's not our role. Our role is not to, okay, let me help you put in a report, I'm going to give you this advice. That's not what we do. We are there to give them the resource to go to, maybe determine whether, where's that line that we're crossing. And then other times it's just, what, let's have a conversation of how you can approach this person, and see if we can work at it from that point, or take it to the supervisor before it even gets blown up to ethics, right? You want to be able to incorporate your leadership and give them an opportunity to help this person work this problem out. So those have been some serious and deep conversations that have been challenging to me, in some cases.
Elizabeth, how do people know to reach out to you?
Well, for one, I've been an ambassador for a long time. I sign my email with that title, even though it's underneath my role. It is part of my signature, as well as with highlighting the value of the month. So that is one way.
Cool.
Obviously, yeah, we've been highlighted in different publications, and I was just telling Tony a few days ago that I was highlighted in a publication of a whole different department, and as an ambassador, and she didn't know about it. They didn't reach out to the Values Ambassador leadership. It's just because in our particular group, I am one of the ambassadors that belong to distribution of the utility company, and so they put it in their little flyer that they sent out. This went out all to all distribution employees. You're talking about over 1,000, and so they know, they get to see your face. And so that's kind of one of the pluses of being enrolled for some time, and gaining that tenure, and reaching out across the halls and making sure that you let them know who you are, having those conversations with them.
That's cool. You got featured like that.
Yeah, that's been a couple of opportunities, as well as being called to speak at other engagements at different locations, to speak to crew members that work outside. Hey, can you participate in this? Because they know that you're an ambassador, and I feel confident in what I talk about, and you have to know what you're saying out there.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I love that you've gotten so much support from your organization. I think Tony Lynn, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this too. And I think actually, Tony Lynn, you added in the chat earlier about leveraging some of the other teams that you have at SCE, some of your communications teams and others, to help you send those kinds of messages and highlight folks like Elizabeth and Yvonne and others that are on your team. Can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to get their help? Obviously, that's they've got their own jobs too, and so garnering additional support from another division is not always easy. But how you've leveraged that, what you're doing with that, and how you help to craft those communications collaboratively with other parts of your team.
Yeah, I would say we actually meet on a quarterly basis with our corporate communications group. So there's a few key folks that I work with on a monthly basis, just generally to send out E&C type of communications, but specifically on the ambassador program. For example, before we rolled out our MS Sway bulletin, it's basically a newsletter. This was going to be used to be cascaded across the organization broadly. And we definitely didn't want to step on CorpCom's toes. We wanted to make them aware that we were going to be doing this, and if they had any concerns, to let us know. But they basically empowered us to go ahead and do that, as long as we branded it a certain way. It was the Values Ambassador Bulletin, not like a corporate publication by any means, but it is cascaded across the company. So we meet with them on a quarterly basis just so that they're in the loop with anything that, that's going to be going out. And then we also meet on a quarterly basis with our human resource business partners. So we let them know how things are going in terms of the program, some new initiatives that we'll be rolling out as a part of the ambassador program, and also, to help encourage them to work with their values ambassadors, in case they need additional support. So they're kept in the loop on a quarterly basis at least. And I mean, we communicate with each other monthly, so it's not like it's just 4 times and that's it. So we make sure that everyone is engaged in that process.
That's fantastic. And we also got a communication, or some talking thread in the thread here in the chat about other types of communications. So obviously, what Tony Lynn's speaking to is a little more formally organized and through corporate comms, or getting the go ahead from corporate comms to go ahead and brand up and do your own thing. We've got folks that have talked throughout the day about using Yammer. Obviously, we've seen Miro being discussed. Teams, I think, has come up a couple times today, and other types of things. So absolutely, finding both that nice blend of media, nice blend of mix of ways to get to folks, communicate with them with your message, and make sure that no matter what type of tool they feel most comfortable using, you're able to get that message out to them. So that's fantastic. Thanks for speaking on that a little bit more. Nick, what do you think about that? Various types of media and communications. Anything you're seeing from others, and maybe some unique things that haven't come up today?
Well, I think every company is going to be different, right? The tools that they use are going to be different. The way that their population interacts with technology is going to be different. And what I would just encourage folks to do is, like, you just have to try a lot of things. Like, set your bar low for, or set, I guess, just try 100 different things and use it all as data. You know what I'm saying? Are you posting on Slack? Are you creating a Slack channel? Are you doing, what Elizabeth suggested, putting stuff in the bottom of your, signature, doing things like that? Like, where are you going to actually get touch points? If you have a workforce that doesn't use email, maybe it's a manufacturing setting, how are you getting in front of those folks? Can you post things on your company? Most people are going to follow their company's, social media stuff. I'm sure the communications department would be fine if you put something together on Canva with a picture featuring a particular ethics ambassador. I mean, what's nice is that the thing we're selling, ethics, everyone wants it. You know what I'm saying? Like, everyone wants a high integrity workplace. Everybody wants a place where they have a voice. Everybody wants to be doing good in the world. And so that opens up a lot of opportunities for us to at least pluck the heartstrings, if nothing else, with the people whose, approval we need. Like, who's going to say no to, hey, I'm trying to make a more ethical workplace. Do you think we can, put this in the newsletter? And I think the other thing as well is, the more sort of guerrilla grassroots we can get with this stuff, we have to just attack it from multiple angles, So reaching out to other people. I mean, so much of this game is life is relationships, as they say. So much of this game is taking advantage of these relationships that you're able to build across the organization. And, that tone from the top, super critical, but the mood from the middle and the consistent, you have to say things, 7 times, 7 ways, getting people, managers, whatever, to start putting that in their emails, putting it in their meetings, talking about this thing. It's very easy to start kind of lighting these fires that can turn into a real inferno, ethical inferno.
Yes, absolutely. Anthony, what did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, although comms have been somewhat of a challenge for us at Starbucks, every challenge is also an opportunity. So, right. For example, when we had a new standard that came out that I wanted our ethics ambassadors to, disseminate to their teams, of course, I initially thought, okay, I'll put together an email message for them to send out, or some other written communication. That we couldn't do, but I thought, I still have a connection. I just got the ethics ambassadors to invite us to come and talk about it to a meeting. Because, the ethics ambassador is a friend of ethics and compliance, so they can do that. And folks loved it. And, the other thing is leverage your CECO, because kind of like Nick was saying, who's going to say no to the CECO if the CECO says, hey, I'd love to come and present to your team, right, or to your leadership. It only took 1 or 2 instances of that for them to want more, because then they could, right, see how engaging and effective it was. So, the closed door just really was an open door to another way of engaging.
So again, I just want to touch on something that he just said. Anthony was talking, and it kind of ties back to another comment Anthony made about 15 or 20 minutes ago. There is going to be a direct correlation between the more ethical workplace and the level of employee engagement. Nobody wants to get chewed up and spit out by the corporate machine. But a company that has heart, especially as these new generations are, taking over our workplace, it's a massive opportunity to do it. And it's not, the light bulbs are already screwed in. We just have to send a little electricity to these light bulbs to turn them on, to say, wow, this is a massive opportunity for us to increase employee engagement. Like, global rates of employee engagement are below 70%. That means people are pushing down on the gas pedal 70% of the effort while the company is paying 100% of their salary. If we can get a little bit more, a couple more points of that employee engagement, just from people feeling like they have a voice in their company, just from people feeling like they're having a hand in building a more ethical organization, all that stuff's going to fall to the bottom line. And we now have something direct, tangible, that we can point to as E&C professionals, as E&C departments, for the broader, impact that we're having. There's a ton of data behind this thing, and it's very easy to start to point to and make the case for an ROI beyond the risk mitigation piece that many of us feel trapped in. So I love everything Anthony is saying.
Absolutely, I do too. And I think we're getting close to the end of our day. We're gonna turn it over here in a minute to
how can this end?
But
how can
exactly,
this end?
Okay. But yeah, maybe we're gonna get off of Zoom, because I know if like any of you, Zoom, you can only take so much Zoom. Love it, but you can only take so much of it. So I know we're going to wrap up our day with Zoom, but we're not going to stop this conversation at all. I think we're going to keep going with this. There's some great resources that ECI has posted. I think Nadine's going to talk about that a little bit more in her wrap up here in a second. But there's a couple of things that just kind of came to mind for me, and then Nick, I'll hand it over to you to kind of give your final thoughts too. To me, this felt like just such an amazing couple of days of learning, and just opportunity is through the roof. Feels like anyone can do that. If you've got somebody who's just passionate about ethics, passionate about talking, passionate about connecting with people, reach out to them to become an ambassador. If you don't have a program started yet, what's holding you back? Well, there's some resources on the ECI site that can help you get going, but just get started, as Nick has said a couple of times, and I think we've heard it from a number of presenters. Just start from where you're at. Just get going, just get moving, and so do it. So we're here, we're excited to have had this opportunity. Thank you to ECI for all the work that they've done to help bring this community together, and I can't wait for what's next with this conversation. Nick?
Yeah, I just think we're at a once in a lifetime thing. We're in a very exciting industry. We have very exciting roles, and this is like 1996 if you just came out of college studying IT. Like, the internet is about to explode. There's all this opportunity. We have that similar thing as we're moving to this humanocracy. We're moving to this knowledge work economy. We're moving to a place where the folks that are in our organizations care about ethics and compliance to a greater degree than has ever been in history. And it's going to be up to us to manifest the type of workplace that we want. So there's so much great information here. I say this all the time: reach out to other people in this community. I've never heard of anybody. Look, if we're in marketing and you're working at Pepsi, you're not going to reach out to the Coca-Cola's marketing department to see how do you crack the nut in India. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're fighting, okay? We're all fighting the same fight though, and we have allies across the world. Literally, we have people that are fighting those same things. And just like that community creation opportunity that Elizabeth referred to, by creating opportunities for other ethics ambassadors to talk to each other, we are our own ethics ambassadors within our organization, and we need to take a note from that song sheet and start singing the same harmony. So love ECI. Thank you guys for putting this thing on. Thank you all speakers for everything you shared. And I'm always going to push you guys to really take advantage of this community that we're all a part of.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here today and moderating our sessions. Thank you to everybody who attended today from ECI. We're excited to continue to grow our ethics ambassadors trainings and programming. I'm going to share a quick slide about some other things that ECI has coming up. We're going to be launching our member community, ECI Connects, in the weeks to come. A few more notes to notate is that ECI, if you're a member of ECI at the organizational level or the fellows level, we have the ability to add any of your employees on your E&C roster to your membership for absolutely no charge. This will give members access to ECI's resources, benefits, communities, and continuing programming and education. So make sure you send an email to membership@ethics.org if you'd like us to add your ethics ambassadors to your rosters. We'd love to do that. Again, we just want to thank Broadcat and ComplianceLine and all of our wonderful speakers for their sessions and participation today. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.